It's very quiet. Beautiful light coming in through the stained glass windows. Just an extraordinary place to sit together and then in quiet. Of course, we enter that timeless, maybe a timeless moment where we're sitting and then the bell struck and we finish sitting and then noise, like everybody begins to talk, right? And then we go into the very unrealistic 5-minute break. Like unreal, like it always takes a little longer, and I always feel a little. I hope that people on Zoom forgive us because I always say 5 minutes, and about 10 minutes later we get back. But it takes a minute, and then we come back, and then they strike the bell, and things become silent again, and it's a wonderful movement. It's very special to gather in this way. I'm very touched to be here and honoured to be a part of things here. I completely missed any announcements at the beginning. I'll just say a few things now, just in terms of announcements. After the talk, after we meet here, by about 4:30, then we'll start to go. We'll go next door for the Sangha celebration. One thing flows into the other. It's nice if a few people who would like to just stay in this room, just put the room back together again so we can leave this room. It doesn't need everybody. Others can just start next door. There'll still be some little bit of setup, and we'll move into that. We have some more events coming up here before the end of the year. Next week, next Sunday, Anne will be teaching, will be leading. Be delighted to have her back, her presence here in the teaching seat again next week. It's a nice return. Jampa, who's also a few rows back there, the following week. We're very rich and blessed with teachers of quality and depth. I look around, I see Brad, I see Robert. That's a wonderful thing about this organisation, and we've practiced together for some years now. And as you practice together with other teachers, we get to know each other. There's something of a family style that evolves from these maybe different lineages and approaches. Something uniquely Longbeach meditation has been brewing over these last several years, and that's awesome. That's very cool. I'm going to lead a day long in person this next Saturday. So just on the 13th, just next week, and that's going to be about Bodhidharma's principle and practice. One of the very earliest of the Zen teachings, which I think is a fabulous teaching and very suited to a day long. So if you don't have any holiday responsibilities next Saturday and you'd like to come and spend a day in focused practice, we'll be here doing that. Everything else is, of course, it's all on the website. It's all on in the e-news and all of the ways that we communicate, and we'll go forward. We're already working. We already did 2026. Most of the calendar is already taking shape for another year after this one to continue with practice. So lots going on. Let's please continue to be a part of it and to keep this being the vibrant Sangha that it is. Today I wanted to talk about the Buddha's, drawn from the Buddha's enlightenment. And then when we move next door, I'm going to say a little bit about Kuan Yin, one of the Bodhisattva of compassion. So a couple of the big hitters of Buddhism we're going to talk about today. And it all begins in terms of our meditation tradition with the Buddha, though it's always good to know that the Buddha was living in a time where meditation had already been established and practiced for many hundreds of years already. I'm sure there were very great teachers and practitioners of depth long before the Buddha's time. But in our tradition, we have a founder, That's Shakyamuni Buddha. Practiced in the Zen tradition. I mentioned the teachers that we have here and those who are not here today all come from different lineages. They all trace their roots typically back to the historical Buddha. However, that's woven through the centuries and the different cultures that it's encountered. But it emerges from India with the Buddha. In my tradition, the Zen tradition, then that route has taken it from India to China, to Japan, to California. That's that lineage that comes down to me has made it through all of these centuries and upheavals of history in order for us to arrive at this point here. And in my tradition, we have a record called the Record of Transmitting the Light. Right? So the Record of Transmitting the Light is a book that was written in the 13th century that traced the lineage in Japan, the Buddhist meditation, the Dharma lineage, back to the Buddha through about 50 or so generations. I think about 55 generations or so back to the Buddha. And if I drew that line now down to the present day, when I received my Dharma transmission from my teacher, he was in the 82nd generation from the Buddha. And then I entered into the 83rd generation from the Buddha. So if eventually I get Dharma transmission to somebody and then they become a teacher, they would become the 84th generation. And it's really something to see the lineage chart when you see that this lineage that comes from human being to human being that's been passed on in this kind of teacher-apprentice model down through all of these centuries. But it begins on the document, and it begins with the Buddha, and it shows the Buddha's name emerging from a circle, like the Enso circle that we have on the Long Beach t-shirts, right? The Enso circle, the circle of emptiness and fullness. That's all the life is in that circle. The Buddha emerges from that, and the tradition begins. And in this transmission of the light, case 1, Shakyamuni Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha saw the morning star and was enlightened. And he said, I and the great earth and beings simultaneously achieve the way. This is taken as a koan and a statement that the Buddha made upon attaining enlightenment. I, the great earth and all beings, simultaneously achieve the way. That's the Buddha's enlightenment. Everybody is caught up in that net of enlightenment. I, all beings, and the whole earth, simultaneously. Simultaneously in that all of the Buddhas in the past are enlightened at that point. All of the Buddhas of the future are enlightened at that point. And you are enlightened at this point. Right? Don't doubt that now. This is our shared light. This is our shared awakening. I, all beings, simultaneously awaken and attain the way. Writing in the 13th century in this book, Keizan Jokin, many generations later, I'll just read just a short comment that he wrote about this case. He says, Shakyamuni Buddha was of the sun race in India. So Shakya, it's like Shakya, it's like from his particular clan, the sun race in India. At the age of 19, he leapt over the palace wall in the dead of night, and at Mount Dantaloka, he cut off his hair. Subsequently, he practiced austerities for 6 years. Later, he sat on the adamantine seat, where spiders spun webs in his eyebrows and magpies built a nest on top of his head. Reeds grew up between his legs as he sat tranquilly and erect without movement. At the age of 30, on the 8th day of the 12th month, as the morning star appeared, he was suddenly enlightened. These words are his very first lion's roar. Right, so they call this the lion's roar of the Buddha when he says this. So we trace this enlightenment back to a particular personage. I'm sure everybody here has at least some knowledge of the Buddha's story, and for many people here have like maybe a deep knowledge of the Buddha's story. Right? You don't have to wander too far into that, but this is somebody who was not satisfied with a life of temporary wealth or pleasure or circumstance, right? So a human being who was profoundly moved and disturbed by the fact of being here. Like to be in this life, like we're all awake in this life now, and we've been awake throughout. We arrived in this world at some point that we can't exactly pin down. But at some point, we found ourselves here. And we've been here since. And we continue to be here. This is the awakening to Vos. Now, in a conventional sense, human beings immersed in this human condition that we are, of course, we seek out security. We have to navigate this dangerous world, and there's things that we need in order to navigate it at all successfully, or to give us a chance of successfully navigating it. But this in itself is not satisfactory to a human being, to just accumulate things. Right? That's very clear to everyone here. Everyone who comes to a dharma practice, to meditation, has not found complete satisfaction in the sensory objects of material possessions of the world. They look for something deeper. They look to everybody here. In Zen we say, isn't everyone looking to return home? Isn't everybody looking to return home? Like for the Buddha, he saw that these temporary circumstances were not going to satisfy or answer his deep existential angst of like, why is there old age, sickness and death? Why do we suffer? What is the meaning for this existence? Why the world? Why this life? And so it says here, he left and he practiced austerities for 6 years. Right? So the life of a spiritual practitioner is typically a life of effort and self-sacrifice and persistence, letting go of what comes easily, right? And striving for something deeper that involves making effort in the way. It makes effort to show up to sit meditation. It takes effort to sit still in a seat for 30 minutes for everyone. Right? Naturally, in the human condition, there's an aspect of ourself that would rather be doing something else, rather be chasing whatever else, involved in something else, right? But we know in the deepest aspect of ourself that to come into the seat, to return to stillness, to return to just being thus, is powerful medicine. There is a union that takes place. There is a returning home that's found in meditation. It said that the Buddha practiced these austerities for years. That was a lot of the practices of the day that still continue in some areas of the world, including India. The Buddha, starved himself. It was believed at the time that if you weakened the body, you strengthened the spirit. That was one path. Right? Sitting for long periods of time, consuming less food, being subject to extremes of of cold and heat. For us in our modern world, this world as it is tests us enough too. Right? We might not seek out going out into the forest and eating very little food and sleeping under the stars. In fact, people pay good money to do that these days. You know, it's like, right, to go off into the mountains and be a hermit. You got to drop some bucks if you want to do that. Right? For us, we're living in a world that is testing us day in and day out. We're all practicing austerities. We're all practicing. But nothing really ended the Buddha's quest. He becomes the best of the best at meditating, at concentration, at technique and method, and yet still there was some deep existential itch, something that couldn't quite get scratched. And at the end of his labors of austerities, it says that he is so weak he falls into a river and would have drowned if it wasn't for the intervention of a young lady who was tending cattle, who rescued him and pulled him from the water and gave him some milk and rice that revived him enough to be able to survive. And so this is in the story of the Buddha. After giving up a kingdom, after leaving his family, right? Some of the more difficult, hold on a minute, he did what? Didn't he have a young child? Wasn't he married? Didn't he have the responsibility of a kingdom and people that relied on him? That's a heavy trade to put on. That's a big trade. I'm going to turn my back on that in order to achieve great spiritual liberation. That's, going all in on that and then to fail at the end. To have nothing, to fail at the end, and to fall into a river weak and emaciated. Right? And at that point, to have the decision made for him, there is nothing left to do. There is nothing left to seek or to find or to achieve. Every one-way street has already been explored. The territory has been thoroughly explored. Everything has been found. What is there to do except to finally sit on the ground, immovably? It said that he found the tree that would go on, become the Bodhi tree. The tree had been sitting all this time, quietly sitting all of this time, had a real head start on the Buddha. Right? Imagine the tree and the Buddha comes along. What have you been doing running around all of these years? Come and sit under these branches and have some shade. And in how Keizan Jokin puts it here, spiders spun webs in his eyebrows, magpie built a nest on top of his head, reeds grew up between his legs. I think we can safely say there's some, a little bit of metaphor at play here, or some, maybe we're stretching things. It's maybe apocryphal in that way, but it makes the point of immovability, of just finally fully sitting down. So when I talk about meditation in the Zen tradition, the art of just sitting, that essential point, talk about it over and over again. But when you come to meditation and whatever has gone on before, whatever's going on in life, whatever the circumstances, when you sit and the bell is struck, just sit, stop, watch, allow. That's all. Just sit down, stop. Stop looking for something, stop trying to be somebody different or somewhere else. Stop finding fault with as you are, as this is, as the world is around you, and fully sit down like the Buddha did and receive the world and receive the light, which is so magnificently coming in through the windows. Everything is here. This is awakening. So the Buddha finally really sits all of the way down for a long period of time. Must have had good knees. Blessed with good knees. Right? And then finally, on that morning, and it said it was for 7 days and nights. That's why retreats are often 7 days and nights. And it also fits nicely with taking a week off from work. So happy coincidence. 7 days and nights, right? At the end of that 7 days and nights, the Buddha sees the morning star and is enlightened. And it's worth stepping back and imagining that scene. If we see that scene of the Buddha sitting, long days and nights, emaciated, nowhere to go, nowhere left to go, and nowhere to go back to. Just there, on the ground, under a tree, in the plains of northern India, maybe the Himalayas in the background. I draw it when I picture a nice scene when I picture this. Right? And it's dark at first. And then it begins to grow light, and the dawn appears. And then, as we see now, down this present day, in the same sky, it's a wonderful full moon a few days ago. Just like it's extraordinary, like in the desert where we now live in, seeing that moon come up. Right? And sometimes also Venus, the morning star. That the Buddha sees the morning star, and opens his eyes, sees the star, and is enlightened. And then when we say that, this causes the whole dilemma of what does that mean? What is that? What does the Buddha realize upon seeing the morning star? He exclaims, I, the great earth and beings simultaneously achieve the way. Keizan Jokin says a little further along here, if this is the way it is, what do you call this principle of enlightenment? Let me ask you, does the Buddha become enlightened with you, or do you become enlightened with the Buddha? If you say that you become enlightened with the Buddha, or that the Buddha becomes enlightened with you, this is not the Buddha's enlightenment. It's not the principle of enlightenment. If you want an intimate understanding of enlightenment, you should get rid of you and the Buddha at once and quickly understand this matter of I. I is the great earth and all beings. I is not just Shakyamuni Buddha. Some words from Keizan Jokin, which is extraordinary. Again, somebody penned that 750 years ago, and it's still as beautifully relevant now. Right? We can imagine, he sees the morning star and becomes enlightened. So we have the Buddha seeing the star. We see Venus often, you see the moon often. Are you just getting enlightened all over the place? Do you feel like kind of, every time you see the moon, it's like, boom, that's it. I'm gonna... Does it feel special? Is it special? It is wonderfully special. So yeah, every time you see the moon, remember, you're enlightened. Every time we see Venus hanging in the sky, we're enlightened. Right? More difficult to see when the aesthetics are not so beautifully arranged. Right? Like when the bill arrives in the mail, you're enlightened. like, right? Or you get, some health results back, which are not so good. Hard to see then. Is that enlightenment? So if the Buddha just sees a morning star, maybe not so much happens. It might be, beautiful and appreciated. And we could say that the morning star sees the Buddha. The Buddha opens his eyes and the morning star pierces the Buddha. And maybe we get a little closer. In our Dharma practice, we begin with a very human-centric, conventional way of understanding and navigating the world. It's me and other people and things in it. And yet we know, our heart knows and our mind knows, that that is just a part of things. And there is something deeper and constant that is also true. And when we say the morning star sees the Buddha, then that is a shift that takes it from something that I'm doing and seeing, but rather something is seeing and revealing this one here. This is a wonderful gate in meditation when sitting. You know, shift from that place of my thoughts, my thoughts, I'm having this sit, I'm sitting here, this is me, and things happening to me. You know, that's the way that we navigate the world, that's so, but that's the human condition. But our practice of meditation is to relieve the dukkha or suffering of the human condition by taking refuge in our Buddha nature, which is unconditioned. That's as true now as it was when he wrote these words, as it was when the Buddha was walking the earth. I, all beings, the great earth, are simultaneously are enlightened, are awakened. Awakening enlightenment is not something waiting in the future, buried somewhere or hidden out of sight. It looks that way to us as human beings. You know, we live in our human condition with all of the challenge and the difficulty and the flawed and incomplete aspects of that. And that's challenging. We live with that one. And on a human level, that just continues as long as we're here being human. It turns out that's part of the package of appearing as a human being, living with that. There are many things we can do about the human condition. Many modalities and paths that we can explore in order to relieve suffering and bring benefit. But this way of enlightenment, I, all beings, the great earth, all at once, simultaneously enlightening, is not about fixing this one here. It's not about moving the furniture of the self around and arranging it better, but rather turning inward, looking inward, opening the aperture of the senses and the mind, and receiving the light of the stars. In one of the oldest ideograms when Buddhism came to China, at first the ideogram for meditation, it had one of the characters had something to do with concentration. Later on in Chan Zen, that was taken out, and instead the character for meditation is the body, drawn as an altar. And sitting meditation is drawn as the 3 stars above, the heavens above, and the body is an altar receiving the light of heaven. That's the spirit of Chan and the spirit of Zen. And the spirit of just sitting, the practice of sitting immovably and receiving the light of the world. The light of this extraordinary mystery of awareness that each one of us is and has always been, without gap, without pause, this constancy of appearance. On a human level, we're all changing, right? The circumstances are different, the conditions are different. The arrow of time is moving forward. What is it that is timeless, that is not moving forward or backward, that is never different, that is always thus? That's what we realize through this practice. And then we consciously share in this, I, all beings, the great earth, simultaneously realize the way. We are awake to thus. As simple and beautiful and as difficult and as profound as that. And even just a moment, a glimpse, an inkling, where the worries and concerns of the perpetually dissatisfied self drops off and is forgotten is a powerfully liberating. And that's what that's what Dharma practice offers. And nothing beats being at home in your own skin. Nothing beats being complete in yourself as you are. Just as you are. Imagine that. In a world that is trying to convince everybody they need to be better or different. To be just completely who you are through and through. That's the confidence and surety of a mature practice. You know, it's what it is to be an ordinary person. But that's an extraordinarily rare thing, to be at really be at home. And yet it's in everybody is that already. You know, we begin and end and all the way through, we're complete, without a gap, with no problem. But being human as we are, we tend to screw that up and cover that up, and it's obscured by our karma and our conditioning and everything that ever happened to us. And that's for work. That's for work. And that requires for showing up. You know, we look back over this past year where we had the classes, where, you know, we did the 10 perfections, we did the 3 this, the 6 that, the 4 noble truths, right? All of these different things, and we're already mapping out 2026, and we'll do some of this, and we'll do that, and we'll do the other. All of that flows from this I, from this one. All of that flows downstream from this immaculate enlightenment now. Everything comes from that. Everything is downstream of this immediate illumination now. And we can swallow, we can accept that, lean into that. Wait, what? Really? This is that now. Not our ideas about it and what it might be someday. But this precious moment, this precious opportunity now. How extraordinary to be gathered together like this in a room, to sit, to be here to celebrate another year, you know, and in a difficult and challenging, chaotic life, to have these touchstones of peace, collegiality, friendship, support. And so I really appreciate you continuing to be on this journey, in this unfolding of Sangha and practice.
Hi, my name's Tim. It's the generosity of people like you that make these videos possible. If you had some benefit from the video and feel an urge to donate, you can make a donation here. If you're interested in seeing more because you're curious, you can click here and see more videos. And if you're interested in subscribing to Long Beach Meditation, you can click here. Thank you so much for your attention. Take care.